We're live on Facebook. Welcome, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Thomas, and it's Straight Talk, but not always straight talk. And next week, it's going to be very not at all straight talk, but that's a whole other conversation. We've got not one, not two, not three, but four amazing love coaches here to give you wisdom, tips, tools, and practices. And tonight's topic is how to handle the hard stuff, how to have hard conversations. And so we've got, of course, my teaching partner, Trish Wright, my roommate and masterful friend, Paul Sterling, and Heidi Love, recently visiting from Hawaii to California. So you're going to be hearing a lot from them. And I want to welcome those of you in our Zoom room, and I see a lot of our regulars are with us. Welcome Lorna, Steve, Rev, Eileen, Dia, Chick, Ann, and a couple of others whose names it doesn't show, but welcome. And we would love to make this interactive. So let us know any questions you have about relationship and what are some of the hard topics to talk about. And I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Trish, to get us going with what's an initial hard topic to talk about that you want to offer some thoughts on, Trish.
Well, so there's lots of little hard things, or I'm going to call them socialized, challenged conversations, because I think a lot of people get really scared to talk about what's real and authentic. So I'm dating on a dating website, and I play this game called the make or break game. And some people who are brave enough to play with me have, it's about sharing like your stuff, like, hey, what's going on with you? And things that come up for a lot of people are, what their traumas are, what they're afraid of. Sexual histories are big ones, and things about their habits. And those are the hard topics. Those are the things that people most often are like, oh, I don't want to tell you that. And I'm like, I know you're human. I know you're going to have stuff. Let's just know each other's stuff so we can decide whether we want to take a whole lot of time learning this stuff or not. So those are a couple little pieces. I think that they're another challenging piece is a piece about how to talk about our stuff together. Like you're Scott, you're my stuff, or Heidi and my stuff, or Paul's my stuff, and how to do it with love. How to find connection and how to find collaboration there. So that's my initial thoughts. I'm sure that we'll evolve into an amazing conversation.
One quick question before I go to Paul and Heidi. What do you do to make it safe? I mean, you're dating, guys or gals, whoever you're dating or flirting with online, they want a good impression on you. How do you make it safe to talk about the stuff that they're not used to talking about?
Usually I go first. I usually go first. I'm like, all right, so, or, I don't know what it is about me that's particularly disarming. Maybe you guys know. But often people are like, here's an example. I recently reached out to a new person, and they were like, I like to be on the bottom. And I was like, and? I was waiting for something really deep. and he was like, oh, okay. It's they'll share something, and I thank them for sharing. Thank you for sharing that piece of vulnerability with me. And then I'll get curious about it. And that's a big piece. Or I'll share something about some of my Cptsd triggers and what that looks like. I'll just, we're all vulnerability junkies over here, vulnerability creates intimacy, and sometimes, I'm gauging the conversation whether or not it's appropriate. Sometimes I'll introduce them to my Instagram before, because then they're like, if they go through my Instagram and they're like, oh wow, this chick's like, it's all about attachment theory and like relationship, you know, or I'll be like, hey, meet my friend over here. So you make it safe in just incremental, slow ways. You're calibrating and aligning, right?
Great. All right. Thank you. I am going to gallery view, and Heidi, it's good to have you back on the show. What's a difficult conversation that you have, and how do you work with it?
First, can I comment? I'm just in the joy of hearing about dating. I am not great at dating. I'm a serial monogamist that stays in long-term relationships too long. But I was thinking that we should have bloopers. Can you guys hear me? We should have bloopers about dating a relationship therapist or a relationship coach and what people go through with us. I think that would be so fun, because I think of how when I have gone on dates, the type of questioning that I do, and I think sometimes people might feel interrogated. I had one person say, wow, you really ask a lot of questions, don't you? So anyway, I just had to, I was just chuckling at that in tenderness. And I love going deep with people. So I'm thinking of hard conversations. I've been in a few myself, and I've been talking to a friend about some. So I think I love to bring up what is real for me and alive with clients. And I think having conversations with a beloved or a partner that is naming the incompatibilities or possible deal breakers, or where you don't fit in relationship, that is a very tough conversation. And I was working with a client who is in a long-term relationship, not receiving intimacy. And how do you have the conversation of either having some intimacy or getting some outside the relationship while wanting to stay in the relationship? I think that's also a very tough conversation to have. So those are the two that come to mind.
And any tips, tools, things you've learned that you'd like to share?
I think that I love the saying that you can't be fully in a relationship until you don't fear losing it. And I have found that to be true. I think one of the first things before having those conversations is being super clear on what is your truth before having the conversation with the other. Because if you're not solid in your truth, that can easily be changed in a conversation, trying to please someone else or trying to not lose the relationship. And so clarity and having support, and probably, I think having support is an amazing thing, either before the conversation or during the conversation. Having somebody to support the two of you or whoever you're having the conversation with would be a good idea. Definitely getting support ahead of time to get very clear before entering into it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Heidi. You know, I just realized it's interesting. All four of us are single. I mean, that's not that common, but we're all single right now.
At the same time.
At the same time, that's kind of says something.
What are you trying to say here, Scott?
It's just kind of,
I also, can I just say one thing to Heidi? I call it self-selecting out when they choose that it's too much. Like, I'm like, oh, okay.
Good.
Thank you for self-selecting out. That's good. Thanks for holding your boundary. Because, you know, people like, I'm certain that people like Scott, Paul, you and I are like kind of intense.
it's true. It's true.
It's okay.
Yeah, definitely that. All right, Mr. Sterling, Paul Sterling, good friend, amazing coach. And because we live together, I know that you're helping people have breakthroughs. So tell us a little bit about what does that look like? What are some of your tips, tools, and practices for having small or even bigger breakthroughs?
I'd love to. And before I do that, I want to just riff on these two gorgeous goddesses that have spoke before me. And one of the things that Trish said that I think, it's not just in dating, but anytime that we're making a vulnerable request, lead rather than just go, what do you want to do? Lead with what I want to be vulnerable first, and lead and then make a request. And so what Trish was saying about leading to create safety, that not only is in dating, but it's throughout the relationship, you know, and having those courageous conversations like Heidi was talking about. And I want to just give a quick example. And I asked my client if I could share this, and he's an airline pilot and flies 777s, and he was flying from Madrid to Miami, landed in Miami, and there was an upset in first class. And it was such a big upset that the flight attendant came back, got him, said, you got to come back and handle this. And he's walking back there going, what would Paul do? What would Paul do? What would Paul do? And he gets to this woman that's upset, and everybody in first class is paying attention to this upset because it's rather loud. And he just looks at the woman and goes, what do you need to feel safe right now? And it created an instant breakthrough in that moment. She reached out and touched his arm. I just need to feel secure. And he ended up walking her up to customs and just staying with her. And it could have gone terribly wrong. It could have gone like, lady, you need to sit down, or we're going to call the police, or, you know, or TSA, or it could have gone totally the other way. But the thing I think all four of us are totally committed to, at least most of the time, is courageous vulnerability. And what it takes to create a breakthrough is that vulnerability. And a little one, a little vulnerability, a little breakthrough, it's changes. And a big one is transformation. And it's like, if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not creating breakthroughs, you get stuck in breakdowns. So that's just the little introduction, Scott. And I'm really proud to be with this group of coaches who make such a huge difference on the planet.
I just want to riff on that too, is that to have a challenging conversation, it takes both parties to be willing. And I've been thinking a lot about the willingness of connection. So if I'm willing and the other person is like, I have no capacity and I'm unwilling to do that, then it's not really going to go any further. Right? Because there's a roadblock. And that's a key piece to kind of moving into more connection is that both people are at least willing to try to be curious, you know, or yeah, I mean, that's, I exactly mean that, willing to try, not necessarily just willing to be curious. Is like, even if I'm stubborn and in a place is like, hey, I can see that I'm having this and I want to move forward. I love that.
And Trish, I'm going to riff on your riffing and then we'll hand it back to
Yeah.
Scott. But like, when I have a background in quality control, and I am a bit of a brainiac and a geek. I'm known as like sort of the relationship geek here. And the inner circle, there's three things that I talk about to create lasting love. And one is availability. The second one is capability. And the third one is willingness. And willingness is like the willingness to be courageous, to be vulnerable, and to be compassionate. And if you're not available mentally, physically, emotionally, and then if you're not capable, and one of the things Scott's done is create the Love Coach Academy, and he's trained a lot of people in how to be capable in a relationship. And that last part that's so key that you brought up is that willingness. Are you willing to be courageous, to be vulnerable, to be compassionate, and lead the way?
I would like to jump in here too. I have dogs barking. I have a 15-year-old. I'm working with a couple 15-year-olds right now, and one of them has the communication skills that I would love a partner to have. But he has a very simple way, and it's so first I want to give compassion to anybody who feels like they are the one wanting to do the talking and being the recipient of somebody that feels unwilling to you. That's a really lonely place to be. And he was sharing that at his age, that his peers don't have communication skills and how lonely he is in that. And so I want to give a really simple way that he checks in with me. And I did not teach him this. He learned from his parents, which is beautiful. But I say, how are you feeling about that? And he'll literally pause. He'll first tell me physically how he's feeling in his body. Well, my throat's a little tight. My belly's a little anxious. I feel my shoulders tight. And then he'll give me the emotion. And I think that's a wonderful way, if you don't know anything, and you want to be vulnerable with somebody and you have no idea what to say, tell them how you're feeling in your body, and maybe when are you sad, angry, anxious, nervous, or just even saying, you know, right now I have a lump in my throat and I have no idea what to say. And that can be the entry to vulnerability.
Best advice ever. Especially, especially for humans socialized as male. So they're taught not to share their feelings. So specifically for avoidance, and generally for people who socialize as male, they're taught to like stuff it all, and they're kind of like, disembodied from people. The biggest advice is to just share what's the sensations in your body. Oh, you guys are amazing.
It's so sexy too. If there's any men on that thinks it's not sexy to be vulnerable, just like ask any woman when you share how you're feeling, or you share a tear, or what your body is going through. I mean, oh my God, melt me.
Wow. Okay. What comes to I think though, what is important is there is a distinction between being vulnerable and being weak. Because I don't think either of you would be attracted to a man that you perceive that's weak. You are attracted to a man that's strong and capable of being vulnerable. Think about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Trish. I'll just say, from a background of spending 18 years as a commercial fisherman in Alaska from the age 17, we did not give a shit if you had feelings. We did not care. There was plenty of days that we worked 24 hours. We were not interested in your feelings, and I wasn't interested in my own. And it really has been a challenge. And I've had clients that have come to me, especially from the military. One of these guys was like a Green Beret. He said, I would rather jump out of a plane at night into enemy territory where people are literally trying to kill me than sit here and talk about my feelings and needs. So the amount of conditioning we have culturally for at least some part of this generation of masculine men. So it's, how do we get to our feelings and keep our growl? So it's an interesting dance we're talking about here. Right? There you go, Trish. Take it away.
I think that I have to own that I'm in a particular generation, and I don't see weakness as being someone who would shy away from aggressive or violent situations. I don't see that. I don't see I don't see it like that. Okay, so I read this book called The Couples Workbook by a group of psychologists from around the world. It's the School of Life. I don't know if you guys ever heard this, but there's this one section that totally blew my mind, and it was called The Weaknesses of Strengths. And what it said was that there's this double-edged sword, that I'm going to fall in love with Heidi for all of these amazing things that she's got going on. Like, oh my goodness, she's, brilliant and intense and lovely and all these things. And what comes with that is the shadow side of all of these amazing things. We all have it. Like, I am spontaneous and I have all these things, but there's also the opposite annoying traits that come along with that. So you're like, people will be like, oh, Trish, you're so great. And I'm like, well, wait for it. Because there's also other side. There's the moon will move, and there's, and the weaknesses of strengths. So just because I'm gregarious and this means that I'm also the back end of that is that I am, I spend a lot of time on my own, in my own space, and I'm a very big introvert, and I like to stay there for a while to rejuvenate. And that's, you see, so I don't see it in this, like, I don't see humans as being quote unquote weak. I just see that there's an evolution of what qualities are desirable. For me specifically, I have dated some beefcakes, yo. And I didn't, after a while, I was like, wait, what? What else is there? I want, unzip that heart and show me all the stuff. They were like, huh. Like, oh, okay. What do you cry about at night? What movies do you laugh at? What do you long for? Tell me what it's like in your body. Tell me what your dreams are. That's sexy. That kind of vulnerability and rawness. Like, I don't see it as strength and weakness. I don't see it in that duality.
It's interesting, Trish, for my Facebook, I have like 4,500 friends and 300 people that are in waiting. And it's like, I don't just take people on as friends. I ask them this question, which ties into what you're saying, which is, what wakes you up early? What keeps you up late? What opens your heart? What breaks your heart? Because I want to know, is this a human being? Do they just want to put another person on their Facebook friend, or are they going to be someone who could share those things and be alive? And, Scott asked me in the beginning was about breakthroughs, and where can we have breakthroughs in the way we're getting along on this planet? Because I looked at, I described this, I was on a talk last night, and I'm the guy, some kids are born with natural talents like athletic or people skills. My older brother had the athletics. I had none of them. My older brother was a martial artist, a race car driver. My younger brother, I went surfing with him once, and I had a surfboard. I had taken lessons, all the rest of it. First time he gets on a surfboard in Mexico with me, he catches the first wave he goes for, surfs it all the way to the beach, and then walks off of it. I'm like, I was ready to take my surfboard and just destroy it, sell it, get rid of it. But what I'm saying in a roundabout way is that the things that we're talking about here are skills that people can learn and muscles that you can develop. It's not like, at least for me, I was not born with good relationship skills. I had relationship repellent. And so it's taken hanging out with people who are courageous, who are teachers, to create where I am now, which is totally different than I was as a young man in relationships. I was terrified. And now one of the best relationships I have is with me. And that's actually a huge breakthrough. So there's one breakthrough for you, Scott.
Okay, thank you. And I'll kind of riff on that. I'll go to gallery view for a moment. It is really important for us to have a great relationship with ourselves. And the more that we can self-source and meet our own needs, the more attractive we become, because we're not looking to someone to fill us up. And when we're in that grasping, I need to be filled by you energy, we're repulsive. When we are, hey, I want to connect. I want to connect in a deep way. I want to answer Trish's questions and engage in that level. And I'm very whole unto myself as well. That I think is important. And I guess just back to the weak thing for a moment. I wasn't necessarily talking about weak physically. I was talking about just, again, when Heidi was saying, hey, a vulnerable guy, I'll jump on you. Yes, but vulnerable is different than weak, right? Vulnerable is actually, what's sexy is somebody who's strong and confident, who can be vulnerable, as opposed to somebody who's like, I'm kind of broke and I'm really struggling, and that's not very attractive, right? That's not very attractive. But I would imagine, right? But if it's somebody who's strong, who's then sharing with you, like, hey, okay, I trust you. Let's go deep, and I'll share with you what I'm working on. I'll share with you my challenges. I would imagine that's a balance that is a more attractive picture. Is that accurate? Put it to the team there.
Well, I'll dive in with something a little bit different. It's along the same lines. For 8.5 years, I volunteered and taught in prison and worked with minimum to maximum security inmates. And there were times that I would cry in presenting. I would be in front of the room and I would cry, and I stood solid in that moment of feeling it. And there were times when I can remember this big Native American guy who was in the class, and I'm 6'3", and he was bigger, and he was crying because he said, almost everybody that's ever loved me has died or I have beaten them up. And this is in a group of maximum security inmates. And he was at that point sobbing. And, you look at some of the shows and they're like, oh, guys would like jump on him and say he's weak or something. But the truth was the rest of the groups really respected him. These men said, you go, we got you, we got your back, feel it. And it's like, it was a courageous thing to feel that pain and to be with that. And we'll do almost anything sometimes to avoid certain feelings. And what a breakthrough is when we can lean into those uncomfortable feelings and change either habits, patterns, or beliefs when it comes to it. So,
All right,
this background.
All right, I'm going to take us into a different direction. Oh, no, I'm not. Trish is
I
giving
was wondering if Heidi wanted to say anything.
I just wanted to jump in really quick because we're really on the masculine, feminine, and whether you're dating a man or a woman or somebody same sex, like vulnerability, I think comes from strength. And so I do think it takes strength to be vulnerable, because even, as a woman, I'm afraid to share my innermost feelings or things I might think are weak out of fear of rejection. I mean, I think fear is underneath a lot of holding us back from being vulnerable. And of course, there's masculine, feminine traits and how we're raised and group consciousness around that. But I think that vulnerability is scary for everyone. And it's vulnerable.
Trish, is there something you wanted to add?
Oh, I did. Just on this weakness piece. I feel like I'm a really strange person, or like maybe I just like fell into the millennial bucket and I'm just like hanging around in there somewhere. I think that, contrary to popular belief, that boundaries are really sexy and really, really attractive is when someone can self-source, be accountable for their actions, and be really like take ownership of that, and to hold their own, and be willing to negotiate reality. Like don't get me wrong, negotiate the places in the relationship, but it's this place of like, I find that really, really strong, like a strong person. So if someone was just to be like, you know what, my car got broken into, I kind of depressed, and it's just kind of like my life's a little like meh, I'd be like, wow, that's super brave and courageous. And that is what is attractive to me. The reality and the truth about it all is actually the piece, even if they're not in this like ideal piece of what I'm looking, quote unquote, looking for, whatever that looks like. I mean, that's a limiting understanding of what is possible in my love life. If I'm looking for some like statuesque person of like that's just an idea or a fantasy of things. then I wanted to kind of just share about something that someone said is, can we fall in love with the full spectrum of a being? Well, can you fall in love with yourself for all of your stuff? Can you just be in love with the capacity at which you are human? So that means like looking at your, like whatever things that you nitpick yourself over, can you love those pieces there? Because those pieces are the kind of pieces that irritate you in another person. And I often really like come back to this quote that I read many years ago, is that you fall in love with those who inspire you to fall in love with yourself. And that right there is like when you're like thinking about falling in love, who's feeling the feelings? You're feeling the feelings, or I'm feeling the feelings. And so you're falling in love with that feeling of epinephrine and endorphins, and you're falling in love with that. And to be able to like live in that reality piece of just being like, oh, Scott has his things, like there's things, can I love him there? Heidi and Paul have these things, I have these things, can you love me there? And that's one of the pieces that I actually have the hardest time in relationships with, is that people will, and maybe you guys have this too, is that people will have like an upset, or will have an upset. And then instead of the willingness or the curiosity of like, letting that person just have their human experience and being with them in it without taking it on, that's the place that often, and because I find that people, well, again, when I date people socialized as male, is they often go, estrogen, they run away. Because I'm gonna be like, it's 3 days before, and I'm gonna like eat the bag of donuts, and you're not gonna get any, and don't you dare touch it, or I'm gonna eat your hand off. Okay, that's an exaggeration.
That is an exaggeration.
I'll share the crumbs, Scott. God, but you know what I'm saying is like, I'm certain that I'm not the only person that's experienced this. And I'm, maybe men too, is like when maybe you share your anger, and the woman's like, oh my God, you have anger. How dare you be human? And we forget that those are the places that make us vulnerable. And gosh, I'm so sorry that I'm like sideswiping the conversation. And I've been thinking a lot about how we transform our lives. Like, yes, we can do our self-sourcing work, and we can do all this work that we do on ourselves. Like, that's the first key. But to practice these tools, I got to call Paul up and be like, hey, you want to practice these like relationship skills tools with me? Do you want to like get into hard conversations? Because that's where we actually get to like move forward. It actually takes tribe and relationship.
And you're building your muscle there. It's like one thing to have a skill. If you think of any athlete, they practice and practice, and what you practice in private, then you get rewarded in public. But if you don't practice it in private, and we do as coaches, and Trish, you were saying something, I wanted to ask you to dive a tiny bit deeper in it, but you said about accountability, like what does you said it quickly in there, but what does it mean to be accountable?
I'm going to say it in this way: accountable for impact. If I say something like, let's say we're all having a conversation, we're at dinner, and I'm like, I don't like curly hair, I think it's whatever. And Heidi is like she has like a feeling of, yeah, you see it. She's like, she has some feeling about it. And let's say the next time I see her, that like she's standoffish and she's feeling whatever way about it. And she comes to me and she's like, that thing that you said really like struck my feelings. Like, I didn't realize that you had such a judgment or like a discriminative like understanding of curly hair. Now, I didn't necessarily do anything wrong specifically. I have an opinion like everybody else. But I can, what's going to shift our relationship forward is by saying, wow, Heidi, I didn't realize that impacted you so greatly. And I want to take ownership of my impact. I see that I hurt your feelings, and I would love to know more about why and how like it impacted you. Like, tell me more about what landed for you, how that felt in your body, what it made you feel, what it shifted your opinion of me. Like, I want to know these things. I'm curious, because I can take ownership of how my actions and my words impacted her. It's not a guilt, shame, blame thing. It's just acknowledging that I have participated in a harm. That's what I mean. Acknowledgement of it.
Welcome,
It's
everybody.
really important what you're saying right now. And I want to pick apart a piece that I think is really good in communication, is that I see in working with couples and even in my own conflict and relationship, that a person will get defensive when they feel like you think they did something wrong. And I love that you named, like, I didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but I'm owning that what I did, wrong or right, impacted another human. And I think that's a great takeaway for all of us, is to know that when we do something and it impacts somebody negatively, it doesn't mean we're wrong. Maybe we want to have the information of how it impacts. And when we can come from the place of, like, when we go into I'm wrong, then we get defensive and we're not there having empathy for the other person. And when we can own, like, hey, I did this behavior, it doesn't make me a horrible, bad person. I can own that I impacted another human being that I care about. You take the defensiveness away and you can enter the impact, and you can mend the impact, and you can be at choice. Do I want to continue to impact my partner by doing this thing I know impacts them? Or do I want to stop doing the thing that would impact them that way? And you're kind of at choice, and it doesn't have to make somebody bad or good or right or wrong, the action.
This is a big piece in anti-racism work, is that as a white person, and as someone who's socialized as a female and white, that I have participated in harm without even knowing. So when someone, one of my friends who is from wherever they're from, says to me, or maybe it's a transgender person that I like I use the wrong pronouns, when they say to me, like, hey, that shows disrespect for me. Like, oh my goodness, how can I take ownership of that impact? Right? It's right there. And it, thank you for picking that piece apart, because it's so important to just be able to like, that's where I think where most of the disagreements come from, is we all just want to be seen and heard, and someone to be like, oh my gosh, the language that I used had an impact on this person. Here's an example from my most recent family life. I'm visiting my parents, and my stepmom said to me, love, or baby, she called me baby, you have to stop using the F word. It really upsets me, and I'm trying not to get upset with you. I don't want to blow up at you. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll do my best. I can't guarantee that it's going to be perfect. That word is really ingrained into my life, but I will work on it. And I see that this particular word impacts you in a way that physically, like, makes you upset. I see it. I hear it. I'm going to do my best not to do that. And I don't think she had anyone ever really kind of go there with her, just kind of be like, okay, that's the boundary. I hear it. Got it. I'll do my best. When I went back into the room, this is just a funny side story. I went back to my room to go get the cat, who is always traveling with me now, and my bag, and I'm going to my grandma's house, and she goes, oh my gosh, are you leaving because I asked you not to curse? I'm like, no, I just told grandma that I'd be there half an hour ago and I'm late. Whatever. But, so it's like that. Like, that's how fast upsets and boundaries can integrate. No drama, just, oh, I hear it. Now, if it's something that really means something to you, like maybe you, like, who knows? Like, if it's, who knows what it could be. If it's something that means something to you, you can acknowledge that your impact, and you can acknowledge it and ask to negotiate at a different time.
There's a great thing here. Let's see if I can do this in a short way. The difference between a good teacher and a great teacher. A good teacher, when you walk away, all the students are going, wow, what a good teacher. I'm so impressed. Did you see what they did and who they are? And a great teacher, when the students walk away, they go, oh my God, I'm so excited about myself. I never knew that about me. They learn something else about themselves. And a great teacher is not about how great I am, it's how it helps the students lift up. So how that ties into what Trish was saying, I think what we've all been saying is that there's a lot of good communicators that are saying, I said that right, but Trish was wrong. Trish heard it wrong, or whoever it was. I'm just making up. I know Trish can handle it, but it's like, I did it right. They listened wrong. I said it right. And see, there's another level of communication, which we're talking about here, is communication's a response I get. I'm more interested in what Trish heard than what I said. And Trish was more interested in what her stepmom heard than what she said. So it's like when we become interested in entering their world and go, can you tell me what you heard? Because I thought I said I love you and you look really triggered. And so it's like, how do you enter their world? And it's a slower way of communicating, but actually resolves issues a lot faster. We go to war because we don't feel heard, understood, or valued. And whether it's war with our family, our neighbors, the Democrats and the Republicans, that, you know, whatever, the maskers and no maskers, it's like both parties want to feel heard, understood, and valued. And how do we enter each other's worlds so that both people hear that? And it's like, be accountable for the impact. My words have impact. Wow. So there you go.
All right, beautiful, good start. I'm gonna read some comments from our people in the chat, in the Zoom room. Angel, our beloved Angel, also known as Nigel, is in the Zoom room with us. So he's one of my favorite love coaches and longtime friend of Love Coach Academy. And Angel writes a few things that are valuable that are also posed as questions. So I'm going to read these and then love to hear our panelists' responses. Angel writes, vulnerability feels scary. Perhaps we all want intimacy. So isn't vulnerability absolutely necessary for intimacy? I think we probably all would agree with yes. And the other thing that he wrote is, do we fall in love with people or really the feelings of love, activated attachment system, serotonin, etc.? That's a great question. I'm going to actually tackle it first and then open it up to my friends. I think that when we fall in love, it's the latter. It is that serotonin thing, and two people are agreeing, wow, let's have a dance together and let's fantasize about each other and let's project our fantasies on each other and let's see if we can play out some of those fantasies before reality steps in, right? Right? I mean, isn't it kind of how it is?
Yeah.
And that's what we experience when we're younger, up until around age 65 or 70. No. You know, when we're in the millennial stage of life, no, I'm kidding. I'm picking on my teaching partner, Trish, there with that one. No, I mean, obviously, some of us do that for the rest of our lives, and some of us figure out early on, you know, that mature love is actually what Trish was talking about earlier. Can I love you and can you love me for the whole package? My challenges, my pitfalls, all of that. And so I think it is really important to differentiate between what am I looking for? Am I looking for a fantasy and someone to play out a fantasy with? Or am I really looking for partnership, which requires dealing with the crunchy stuff, managing our differences, working the differences in ways that help us to learn about ourselves and learn about each other. So I'll open it up to gallery view and see who wants to tackle it next.
I'd like to jump in about the, do you really fall in love or is it endorphins? And I think both are true, that you fall in love with the person and the feelings and the dopamine and serotonin and all the wonderful things they're creating in you. And I think that, Paul says this too. We both teach on needs, different things about needs, but that we're in relationship to get our needs met. And I find that when people are dating, we accidentally meet a bunch of needs for each other. So we get that feeling of being full. Our needs are met, we're full, we're feeling in love. And when I have couples come to me that have been together for quite some time and they say we're not in love anymore, but we love each other, I said, you haven't fallen out of love, you've fallen out of meeting each other's needs. And I think that learning each other and coming from a spirit of generosity and doing your best to meet each other's needs helps you keep that wonderful feeling of feeling in love.
Yeah, that's really well said. I agree.
I want to riff on that. Thank you, Heidi, and on what the person said, because if there's no fear, you're not actually being vulnerable. You're just being normal. So it takes, of course, there's some fear about really being vulnerable, because you're at risk. Something's at risk. You could lose the relationship. You could lose the connection. And it's taken me a long time to make friends with my needs. My needs in many relationships prior to now felt like a burden. If I could only not have my needs, I could have an easy relationship and not want anything. And so we have 3 different levels, at least as far as I can tell, when it comes to needs. We have need shame, where I feel broken because I have needs. Needs embarrassment, which is where I want you to meet my needs, but I don't want to have to ask you. So if you don't meet my needs without me asking, you don't love me, and I'm going to punish you for that. And embarrassingly, I've been there too. And then the 3rd level, which I got from studying with Marshall Rosenberg, is embracing your needs, where your needs start to feel precious again. I have this precious need that I'd like you to meet for connection or intimacy or love or listening. And it's like, how do we make friends with our needs again? And if you don't treat somebody's needs as valuable, you're not treating that person as valuable. If you want to bring the relationship back up, ask them about their needs. What are you needing? What do you need to, like even when I started the call, when I started my first talk about the airline pilot going to the woman and say, what do you need to feel safe right now? Mm-hmm. Like he was making her needs precious in that moment, and she felt precious. She didn't have to fight for her needs. So it's an ongoing journey to make friends with our needs. And I still can feel a little occasionally shame of even saying that I have needs.
Can we practice that for a minute? So everybody watching and everybody in the room, just say, I have precious needs.
I have precious needs.
And as Auntie Trish is going to say, you deserve to get your needs met, whether by yourself or by actively asking for them in honest, raw conversation without forcing or manipulating to get your needs met.
Beautiful. And thank you, Angel, in the Zoom room for also saying, I have precious needs. And really everybody at home. And if you notice that it's hard to say that, it's hard to own it, that my needs are precious, then that's okay. It just means that there's some work to do with being honest, because it's very common that when we were at some point asking for something and we were told those terrible words, don't be so needy, then we make a choice of, I will never be honest about my needs. I'll just be covert, or I'll silently suffer and be a martyr, right? Neither of which is life affirming. So it is important for us to learn how to own, wow, this is what I'm really longing for. This is what I'm really needing. This is what I value. And that, go ahead, Paul.
One of the challenges with that, Scott, is that sometimes if we don't feel good about our needs, but if we get desperate, then we turn it into a demand. And then it becomes no fun at all. And then it reinforces it. Says, see, nobody wanted to meet my needs, because it becomes like it's no fun to when somebody makes a demand, because I can't feel like, and I'll date myself here, or age myself. I still am in that place in the masculine role of wanting to feel like a hero with the feminine. And if it comes across as a demand, I don't get to be a hero. I'm just a schmuck that delivered, what was supposed to be done anyway. And if the person doesn't ask in a way that's vulnerable, it's not nearly as much fun to want to meet somebody's needs.
Yeah, it's true.
So I want to get to the topic that actually is why I wanted to do this particular show. Okay.
Do you have a precious need right now, Scott?
I do. I have a strong value. By the way, we can call needs, we can also call them values, longings of the heart, desires, those are synonyms for it. So the topic is how to talk about the hard stuff. And as a coach, I'm really sad to see how many couples, families, and friends are breaking up and fighting over different strategies around the pandemic. Now, we're not going to get into science. We're not going to take a position for or against. But I want to acknowledge that people that feel strongly about getting vaccinated have certain values. People who feel strongly about not getting vaccinated and certainly not being forced to be vaccinated also have strong values. And the irony is that they're the same values. It's the value for health. It's the value for safety. It's the value for freedom, right? We all want the same thing, but we have different strategies about how to do it. And so please, I'm just begging anybody listening or watching, you have every right to believe what you believe. You have every right to make the choice that you've made. But please, let's not make enemies out of people that have a different strategy to meet the same values or the same core needs that you have. Please, let's not do that, because it's creating a civil war. It's creating a civil war in a big way in this country. And it's creating all these little civil wars in families, couples, and friendships. So that's honestly what inspired me to want to do this topic and to bring in, three people that I have tremendous respect for as coaches, in Paul and Trish and Heidi. So with that said, go back to gallery view, and who'd like to kind of tackle that particular issue?
I'll touch it and to get it started and then hand it off. But one of the things that I can think of my life before and after Marshall Rosenberg. There's a couple of mentors that really transformed me. Tony Robbins was one of the first ones. Marshall was definitely one of them. And I'm not quoting Marshall correctly here, but I think I've got the essence of it. We rarely will argue about needs, but we'll often argue about strategies. And I think, Scott, what I'm hearing you say is if we can get, and that's why I started something that we called Across the Aisle, which was a talk with trying to get both sides together to find that common ground and find what precious need. And if we just go one layer deeper rather than mask, no mask, vax, no max, whatever it is, but like, what is it? What precious need are you trying to get met there? And the challenge is often the more angry, the more upset, the more righteous we get, it's because it's really a precious need. And sometimes it's a fragile need. It's a fragile strategy. Like a fragile strategy is one that can't be questioned. Mm-hmm. So you could sit the Dalai Lama down and probably question him about anything and he would not get triggered, because his feelings and his beliefs are solid. He's got solid values. And it's like only when we feel really nervous inside do we get really upset when somebody questions us. So can we move the conversation down from strategies up to what Precious needs? And it's a good question, Scott. Thank you for hosting this and even bringing it up.
Yeah, I think I want to jump in on this one. I have lots of experience with clients, but my family is very politically different than me. And we have different views within the family of vaccine, no vaccine. And I think there's a couple of things that pop into my mind, and I love one-liners and acronyms, and I like the live and let live, and I like the stay on my side of the street. And those are some things that help me stay out of arguing about it. But at the end of the day, for me, I love what's being said, that it's each person's values and needs. And when it hits your core values, you do get passionate about it. You do want to fight about it. And if you love somebody and you are fighting for your own value and you really love this person, you feel that it's the right thing to change their mind and bring them to your side because you love them so much. And people we don't love so much, we don't fight with so much. I mean, we do in this big topic, but if we are really looking at our intention and we look at the results of our actions, have you ever convinced anyone by fighting with them to do what you wanted them to do? And I'm going to leave it with that, because the evidence is there that doesn't work. And if you're talking about your personal relationships, do you want to ruin your relationships? Or do you want to talk in a way that values their needs, that has understanding on both sides, and knowing we cannot control what other people do? I mean, I really learned that lesson in recovery. I want to save a lot of lives in my family. I lost my brother to suicide and addiction. Boy, did I beat into his head he should quit drinking, but he died anyway. And, you know, we can love them. We can share our wisdom. We can give our heart. We can share our value. We can share our why. And at the end of the day, we have to stay on our side of the street. And if you want to keep the love that you have with other people, you also have to value they have a side of the street.
That's really beautifully said. Beautiful. Trish, take it away.
I love how you're really invested in the shot, no shot conversation. And I know why, because it's such a kind of a violent debate among a lot of like very spiritual people. There's a lot of people who are really just like, I can't believe you got vaccinated. It's a government control mechanism. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you're not going to get vaccinated. You're going to kill my grandma. These are things that I've heard. And I think that this is one of those microcosms of the macrocosm sort of conversations. Like this is, there's many of these particular pieces, like, or conversations or arguments that are happening in the world. Like it could be about recycling. It could be about masking or vaxxing, or the way people raise their children, or how people choose to connect with their lovers or not connect, or how people have sex or whatever. I mean, it's like literally there's so many zillions of things that people debate and argue on. And I love that what everyone's really sharing, like, is that it is the desire to get your needs met. And it's frustrating when someone doesn't do what you want. And that there's this magic right there. It's like being able to sit with the discomfort of not getting your needs met in the moment, but to really sit with someone else's authentic self. Like not every time is Scott going to behave the way that I want him to behave, or am I going to behave the way he wants me to behave? But what happens when you're practicing these skills with people is like, oh, can I slow down? Can I get curious about where they're at? And can I see and connect to their values? I'm the only person in my general vicinity in my family that's vaccinated. I walked away from a conversation today. I was like, well, I hear your desire for freedom, and I hear that need, and I hear that the fears that you have about it. And I got vaccinated because these are my reasons. I love to travel. I want to, feel safe. I want to feel these things. And I want to go to a restaurant. I have to have a card to go to a restaurant in where I live. You know what? I'm willing to negotiate reality with a bunch of people in California. Like, I'm willing to do that. And I see that you're unwilling to do that. And that's your perspective, your prerogative, and the way that you want to live your life. I can respect that. I also don't have to be around it. Like, that's where the boundary system comes in. I'm not placing boundaries on Paul or Scott to like punish them. I'm placing boundaries so that I can love myself and love them at the same time. Like, that's what boundaries are. I'm not like, Scott, you can't do the thing anymore. That's not a boundary, that's a demand. Scott, I am going to take care of myself in this way so that I can stay in proximity to love and connection to you. And that's the piece of, I think, talking about the hard stuff. You know, my parents and I talked a lot about politics, including mask and vax and whatever. And it was, instead of outright saying, no, that doesn't exist, or no, I don't believe that, I said, oh, you know, I hear what you're saying, and these are the places that I agree on. I also don't agree in these other places because these are my values. You know what happened? Fascinatingly, it was a smooth conversation where we both got closer.
Nice.
Whoa, huh?
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think that what's really important about what Scott's bringing up and Trish here is it's one metaphor, the vax, no vax, mask, no mask, to look at where it's visible, and it may be further away, but it's happening in a microcosm all the time in relationships. And I did a talk once called Autonomy, Boundaries, and Walls. And if we don't feel like our boundaries are respected, what we do is we put up a wall. And so it's like good to get this dance in. What are the boundaries that we can find, and how can we have really the hard conversations so that both people feel heard, understood, and valued? It's like what we all desperately want. And what happens in that, and if people can write that down in a triangle, heard, understood, and valued, the place that ends up being the biggest challenge in that is we're afraid that understanding equals agreement. So what Trish was willing to do, and I'm just making it up, but she was willing to listen to her parents and really understand them. And so they didn't have to fight for understanding. And then at the end, she could either say, I agree or not agree. But sometimes if we get tripped up, we're afraid that understanding equals agreement. And we never really listen to that person and feedback what we think we heard.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That is a really, really important piece. And of course, there's 1,000 different conversations, infinite conversations that can take place where people polarize. I'm just bringing up the vax or no vax because it's so alive right now. And because I'm personally witnessing so many people that I love on both sides that are getting hurt and hurting each other. And so, you know, it's really heartbreaking, actually. It's very heartbreaking. So that's why I bring that up, because it's really, this is a big thing going on in our country right now. So I want to acknowledge Tammy Moore brought up a really good point, which was, you know, that in the old days, back in the old days, you know, there used to be much more of a kind of a gentlemanly, I recognize it's a sexist term, but much more of a tendency for us to have salons to discuss things. And I always loved the word skeptical. Skeptical comes from the Greek word skeptos. And in ancient Greece, when there were all these great thinkers, there was the Skeptos Society. And their job was to look at when an issue would come up in Greek culture, vax or not vax, during their pandemic back in 422 BC. I mean, they would look at it from every possible point of view. And so to be skeptical means well thought out. And it is really important for us to be skeptical and skeptical of our own beliefs. In paraphrasing Einstein, the true measure of intelligence is how quickly we can change our beliefs. And so I just invite all of us, when are we collecting evidence to support our belief? When are we threatening a relationship by calling somebody bad, stupid, or wrong? And I coined that from the great Paul Stirling, in order to support our own beliefs. When are we doing that? When are we so attached to our belief that we're willing to lose a friend or to hurt somebody that we claim we care about? So those are some thoughts, and I'll turn it back to the group.
There's a question I have. Is it compassionate?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not compassionate.
Oh, you're not supposed to give the answer away. I think they
sorry. Salon. Salon's the word, by the way, Tam.
I'm thinking them. You think for yourself and be a skeptic. You know, I'm coming back to curiosity. Like, do I like Heidi, why do you feel that way? Like, tell me about you. Tell me about what's alive for you in this conversation. Like, tell me why you feel the way you feel so that I can connect you. And that's the difference between being like, I can't believe you didn't get vaxxed. You're going to kill my grandma, versus, I understand that you don't have this feeling. I don't know where you're at, and that I'm just, sharing an idea. It's like, wherever you're at, can you please just take care of my grandma and be considerate of when you go to see her? Like there's, hey, tell me why, and then sharing your boundaries around it. Instead of being like, oh my God, Scott and Paul and Heidi, those people are othering. Like, you guys have heard this term, right? Othering. Like, we're othering other people and we're the right ones, but we're othering them because, creating more separation. I don't think we need to do that. Like, you have choices. You have amazing choices that have created your beautiful life, Heidi, Paul, and Scott. Like, I want to love you there. I don't want to love you because you're getting vaccinated, or you have a cool mask, or you went to cool school, or whatever it is that you're choosing to do. I want to love you for your choices, because that's why I love you.
Thank you, Trish. I love you too.
I think
let me just read a couple things from the Zoom room, and then I'll go to you, Heidi. Angel writes, what I'm hearing is that we will likely always argue about the right strategy, but we can always acknowledge and appreciate another's values, feelings, and needs. This is where we cultivate connection. Yes, exactly, Angel. Tammy is who had brought up the idea of salons. And here's a little cool piece of history. I love history. Tammy writes, and by the way, Tammy is a wonderful part of the Saturday Night Alive Global Peace Tribe team. So I'm glad you're with us tonight, Tammy. Tammy writes, the first true salon was held in 1610 by Italian-born French aristocrat Catherine de Vivonne, the Marquise de, she was French, organized as a literary event, possibly like a book club, where ideas about books, art, music, and even philosophy were shared, along with games and social activities. There would be, they would agree not to discuss a certain area of the debate and agree to only discuss these things. Discuss, see, not jumping to solution. That's beautiful. Wanda writes, back in the day, I taught critical thinking and critical reading. When you mentioned skeptic, it took me back a few decades. Were truth seekers, and we retain the power of our own thinking. There is no right or wrong, it just is. Thank you, Wanda, in Texas. Okay, and I'm going to turn over to Heidi. Spotlight's on you, Heidi.
Okay, thanks. I was just thinking with with topics like this, it's a global thing going on. And of course, there's people that we don't know and people that we know. And so I'm just talking about our close, intimate people. I find that when somebody is fighting for something or against something, it really does speak to their values. So if you are wanting more intimacy with those closer people in your life, rather than fighting against them, it's, I want to back up what Trish said, like asking questions, getting curious, because when someone is passionate about something and they're preaching about something, what's underneath is they're telling you their values, their needs, their core values. And if you really want to know someone, you can enter there and you can talk to them about it there. And that's where maybe other strategies can be discussed. When they know you really get why they're fighting for something, when they really believe that you get them, maybe there's an entry point for sharing, well, here's some other thoughts that might meet those values and those needs that are so precious and so important that you have. And it's tough. And I just want to bring it back to love. I mean, I know that sounds so simple. That's my strategy. I love my family. I have had some conversations. I'm more the I love you, stay on my side of the street. My daughter is more like, Mom, you got to activate, you got to tell, you got to fight. And she has conversations with her grandma, and they love each other still. And they're tough conversations, and they both hear each other. But I think really we're all just fighting for our own values and needs to be met. And the strategies, even in every conflict with every couple I've ever worked with, it's really the strategies that we fight over, not the precious needs and values underneath.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And Scott, I was in Texas many years ago. There was a protest about the death penalty. And so there were speakers who were against the death penalty up speaking, and Jesse Jackson was going to be one of them. And the guy before Jesse Jackson was pointing out these protesters are like, hang them, let some of the protests were hang them and let God figure it out. And the speaker was pointing those people out and making them wrong and saying like all of this stuff. And then Jesse Jackson got up, and it was like, it was such an amazing thing, because the first thing he did was honor those people who had the opposing side and said, look, this is what makes America great. We can have people like this right here who can protest right in the middle of this rally, and they're safe here. And we respect their opinion. And it was like in 10 minutes, most of the protest signs just vanished. They melted. And Jesse was a masterful. It was one of the early times of me watching a master communicator. And by acknowledging and appreciating the other person, by entering their world, he was able to melt away the signs without even the intent of doing that. He was just acknowledging the other human beings. And like some people learn nonviolent communication and they do it from their head. Like they can repeat back the words. To me, I know that I have really met somebody when I have this feeling in my body. No wonder they feel the way they do. There's a visceral response inside me. Like if I believed what they believed, I'd be upset too. So tell me your story. And I forget whether it was Trish or Heidi who said it first, but curiosity is one of the most important skills that we teach, to really try to enter each other's world so that they feel heard, understood, and valued.
So, yeah, I don't know. This is really, okay. So I was just watching Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Have you guys seen it? There's
41.
42. But what cracks me up and what I wanted to say is if you all have seen it, and if you haven't seen it, look this part up on YouTube, that there is a gun that you can shoot someone and it gives you the other person's perspective. It's an empathy gun, which cracks me up. I don't remember what it's called, but so they're like shooting each other and being like, oh my God, of course you were like, just what Paul was saying, like, no wonder you probably feel like this and you have this and you have this. And that's really like the empathy is, you got to get curious to find empathy and connection with someone. what's under that? What's under their feelings of upset? What's under those places? I mean, maybe you need to take really good care of yourself so that you're not reactionary, so that you can get curious, right? Gosh, does anyone know the name of that? Do you know what I'm talking about? I would love to have that. Anybody else?
Looks like we lost.
Oh, well, I think we're distracted in the comment box, but I'm going to just bring it back around to just how amazing you all are, like what amazing teachers and coaches you are. And each time I'm able to share, conversations with you, Paul, and you, Heidi, that I'm always like, gosh, I really wish that I could have tea with them more often and like sit with and be with you beautiful humans. Sometimes I get to hang out with Scott when I move my booty over there, but I'm really grateful for the focus on love and compassion and understanding. Like I'm certain that you've touched thousands of people on this planet and that your work continues to radiate out. I mean, we're touching hundreds of people here tonight, and we're also the interpersonal work. So I just want to bring it back to say, hey, do you know these people work with individuals and they teach classes?
Well, along those lines, let's start by talking about some examples. And Heidi can be reached at her name, which is Heidi Love. So HeidiLove.com, HeidiLove.com. I've known Heidi for a very, very long time, and she is a brilliant coach. She's got a wonderful combination of empathy and compassion and provides beautiful tools. So definitely 5 ways to connect in under 3 minutes. That's a really cool download that she offers. And so Heidi, are you available for both online and in-person sessions? Yeah. Oh, where'd Heidi go? Oh, Heidi.
I do believe that's what she said. I do believe that's what she said, is that she was available for in-person sessions as well.
And she's going to be in the Bay Area, so we're speaking for Heidi right now. So,
but isn't it amazing? It's classic. The moment you start talking about something, they disappear. Trish, how about you? Are you available for coaching, or is your dance card full?
I'm actually restructuring a couple classes that I'm teaching. And I'm full currently. If you are interested, you can, reach out to me via Facebook or email or my website, and we can negotiate. But there is something that I do want to promote. And did you get my message? I want to promote Stand Up for Justice.
I did, and I have it all prepared here, ready to go. So tell us about Stand Up for Justice. This is the GoFundMe campaign. Antoinette Hall, longtime friend of ours. And tell us why you wanted to promote this tonight. Well,
again, in how to have difficult conversations, I really want to promote Stand Up for Justice because this particular organization is really about getting clarity and compassion and understanding. It was created based on people who have mental disabilities being shot by the police. So we're the re-education, the understanding, and bringing more compassion to the police force and to families who are needing support in this. So if you're really wanting to support more clarity and understanding in the world and really being the change, taking a moment to donate to Stand Up for Justice. So really, it's a, Antoinette Roots Data and Pato Button, and this is their program. This is really what they're working for.
Thank you, Trish, for bringing that up. I really appreciate that a lot. And yeah, I mean, briefly, the story is that Antoinette has a friend who has a son who happens to be tall, large, and black, and happens to be autistic. And he was at a large, oh my gosh, what do they call it? I'm trying to remember where you buy big food in large quantities at discounted prices.
Costco?
Costco, thank you. My God, I just had a senior moment. So yeah, he's at Costco, he's autistic, and he got upset about something. And an off-duty police officer pulled out his weapon and shot this person. Now, if it had been Paul who had been upset, or me, or Trish, or Heidi, we would have gotten shot because we're white, right? But because this autistic child who was 18 years old, happened to be large and black, boom, shot. In front of his parents, in front of his mother. And his mother is a friend of Antoinette's, and that's what led to Stand Up for Justice, the Jane campaign, educating police. And it's just so important for us to, and I love how dedicated Trish is to bringing awareness and consciousness to the white privilege that the four of us all have, and that many of the people watching have here, and how we can use that privilege to really make some positive changes in the world. So thank you, Trish. I love you for that.
I love humans, even in their annoyingness.
And Angel is writing, remember that Mental Health Week starts October 3rd. So there we go. Thank you. Thank you. Heidi, you're back. Just as I was singing your praises, you disappeared. I've put the spotlight on you.
Uh-oh. Spotlight is on me.
So anything you want to say about your coaching? You're in Marin County.
I work with clients all over the world. So I do Zoom and can be reached anywhere. And I see clients in person when I'm in Hawaii. And right now I'm in Marin County, and I'll be here for the next 2.5 months, and have an office so we can do where inner and outer beauty collide. And I do some deep combinations of the coaching and resonance for patterning, along with trauma and body work for those who need the integration of the two. And yeah, so it's a great chance to see me in person if you're in California.
Awesome. I hope to see you while you're in California. So, all right, I am putting the spotlight on Paul Sterling. Paul, are you available for coaching, and how do people reach you?
Well, yeah, I'm actually a best-selling author, and not that that has anything to do with coaching, but I am available for people who are really committed. What I do is have a breakthrough session where we look at where you are now, where you want to go, and what's getting in the way, and what's it going to take to create a breakthrough. And I've focused mostly with couples, so that both sides get heard. It's not like I take sides. In fact, that's one of the reasons sometimes counseling fails, is because they're trying to figure out who's the right person and who's the wrong one, and who should we blame. But this is like, what are your precious needs, and how do you figure them out and communicate them in a way that your partner can hear you and you feel good about expressing them. So it's deep work. It's intense. I've worked with people that have had affairs and betrayals and broken agreements and getting their needs met and communication issues. So if they want to get a hold of me, they can go to arguelesslovemore.net, or they can get a hold of me. They can text me. So yeah, I saw Heidi put her number in there. That's a great idea, Heidi. So I'll just drop my number in a second. But it's, if you're really committed to having a breakthrough, I'm one option. I'm not everybody's option, because I'm a bit confrontive and challenging. Like I said, I worked in prison for 8.5 years, and I used to work for Tony Robbins. So it's a mix of Tony meets nonviolent communication, meets Byron Katie, meets Charles Muir. So
there you go. And again, the website is same as his book, Argue Less, Love more.net. And that's where you can learn all about Paul. And you can click here and chat with Paul or a relationship support person. Usually it's Paul, quite quickly. So thank you. I'm going to promote my upcoming shows this week. Saturday Night Alive for the Global Peace Tribe, of course, is tomorrow night. And it is the start of season 7, A Taste of Heaven. And I'm collaborating on tomorrow night's show with Kristen Hoffman, who is wonderful. She, of course, is not just an amazing singer, songwriter, musical artist, but she's really a visionary. And she's brought on several of her friends. And we're going to be tackling how do we really up-level our tribe. And we've got Charles Eisenstein joining us. He's brilliant. Andrea Brooke, the Sonic Butterfly, providing music, and several other wonderful guests. So join us tomorrow night. Remember, if you register, go to globalpeacetribe.com to register and come on in at 5:30 Pacific time for the early Zoom Room show. We have a really special Zoom Room show and a special after show tomorrow night. So, but we're going to keep the main show short, 2 hours. That's our goal. And then finally, I have my Sacred Sunday show. And this Sunday, Daniel Ballone, one of our favorite musical performers, is going to be joining us. And he sings these beautiful Sanskrit mantras. And so he'll be singing and also talking about Sanskrit mantras and the power that they have. So it's going to be a really beautiful Sacred Sunday show, 10 o'clock in the morning. So please do join me. So thank you. I love each of these amazing human beings, these wonderful love coaches. And thank you everybody for watching. A wonderful way to support the show, since it's free, is share it with your friends, pop it on your wall, share it out. And I want to acknowledge the majority of the people that watch the show watch the replay. So you replay watchers, hello, thanks for watching, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, or 5 years from now, or aliens from outer space wanting to understand the human species. Whoever you are, whenever you're watching this, thank you.
Scott, can I say one thing about your show? I am blown away. It's hard to believe because I was there when it started, the first one. We were talking and you created this. And in that time period, you have had some of the best speakers in the world on this show, and have touched over 1 million people on this show. So it's Scott's kind of humble about it, but it's a kick-ass event, and it really does make a difference. And people from literally around the world listen in to this creative, innovative, heart-opening, spiritual event.
Oh, thank you, Paul. That feels really yummy. So thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, it is a beautiful show. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Any final thoughts, Trish, my partner in Straight Talk?
I do. I want to say thank you to Tammy, who's like blowing up the chat box right now.
We love you, Tammy.
Oh,
And next week, we should talk about next week's, because next week's Straight Talk is not going to be so straight. Next week's Straight Talk is called Queer, Sexy, Weird, and Beautiful. And,
yay!
and we've got Love Coach Camila and 2 of her friends joining us. So it's going to be a really fun show next Friday night. So definitely join us.
So the not so straight talk.
It's a not so straight talk episode.
Maybe we'll do a hella queer talk sometime. Ooh, that sounds like fun.
Queer talk. That's all of the show for sure. All right. I'm going to go get some dinner. I love you guys. Thank you, everybody. Angel, it was so cool to have you join us. Much love. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Bye.